Mr. McCurry. Good evening. My name is Vernell Bennett Fairs. I'm president of Lemoyne College, and it is my absolute pleasure to welcome you to another Black History Month program that is a Black program of excellence. Tonight's program was a brainchild of our marketing lead. And so when he came to me and said, I've got this idea about a panel, we need a moderator who is going to be steeped in the culture, fiery, and engaging. And I knew I've got the perfect person for that. And it was Dr. Earl Fisher. So I reached out to Dr. Fisher and told him about the program. I told him the name was Black AF. And I said, now, it might be a little too racy. So if we want to change the name, he said, oh, no, no, no. I like the name. Let's keep the name. So it is my pleasure to tell you a little bit about Dr. Fisher before having him come out. Dr. Earl Fisher is a movement and ministerial leader at the forefront of social justice and Black liberation efforts in Memphis, Tennessee, and beyond. Dr. Fisher was born in 1978 in Benton Harbor, Michigan, to Minister Claudia Fisher and Mr. Earl Bradley. Dr. Fisher is a community organizer. He organized the Memphis Grassroots Organizations Coalition in August 2015 in response to the brutal death of Darius Stewart by Memphis police officer Connor Schilling. Spearheading initiatives in criminal justice reform, media accountability, the removal of Confederate monuments, and voter empowerment, Dr. Fisher formed Up the Vote 901 in November of 2017 to give more political power to more people and to increase voter turnout in Memphis and Shelby County. Dr. Fisher teaches religion and humanities at several local colleges and universities and is a 2019-20 Henry Logan Starks Fellow at Memphis Theological Seminary. He continues to provide necessary insight as a pastor, professor, and an urban poet. Dr. Fisher earned a Bachelor of Science degree in Computer Science from Lemoyne College, a Master of Divinity degree from Memphis Theological Seminary, and is ordained in the Christian Church Disciples of Christ and missionary Baptist denominations. In 2018, Reverend Fisher earned a doctorate of philosophy and communications from the University of Memphis and currently serves as senior pastor of Abyssinian Baptist Church in Memphis, Tennessee. Please welcome Dr. Earl Fisher. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam President, and good evening, everybody. It is always an honor and a joy and a privilege to be back at home at 807 Walker. It's always a joy to see, fellow classmates and community members and elders, and above all, it's always good to see the current students at this that I affectionately refer to as the Blackest college in Memphis and Shelby County. So I want to do what I can to try to provide an opportunity for us to have a robust conversation and dialogue about what has been happening in the city of Memphis and what we can do as a community and what we believe Lemoyne has done, is doing, and can do as an institution to help us adequately respond to the moment that we're in. I want to, again, thank Madam President for thinking enough of me to moderate this conversation. And since this is a conversation that includes not just these wonderful panelists that I am about to introduce, but also each of you wonderful people who are here today, we're going to ask something of you at the offset. So this is streaming from all of the college's social media sites and pages. So for those who are on Facebook, if you would be so kind as to pull out your phone and get on Facebook, go to the Lemoyne College Facebook page where this is streaming and share the stream, because that's going to be the place where we're going to try to engage you in conversation through the chat. So if you have a question or a comment that you want us as a panel to respond to or to consider, we hope that you would put it there. I'll be trying to follow along, and y'all be gracious towards us as we do the best that we can. For those who may be on Instagram or some of the other social media sites, please, again, find where this is streaming and share it so that we can reach the people who need to be a part of this wonderful conversation. I have some wonderful people who we have invited to share in the conversation, some of whom are near and dear to Lemoyne, and one of whom is near and dear to me, but definitely necessary for this particular conversation. So let me invite these wonderful panelists and then set the stage for our conversation. First, an alumni of the Lemoyne College and chairman of the Shelby County Board of Commissioners, my dear brother. Let's give it up for Mr. Mickell Lowery as he comes. He is not fortunate enough to be a alumni of Lemoyne College, but he is definitely somebody who is essential to this conversation as a scholar and as a pastor. He is the senior pastor of the Gifts of Life Ministries and professor of communication at the University of Memphis. Let's give it up for Reverend Dr. Andre E. Johnson. She is a viral sensation, whether you know it or not, and she is also an alumni of Lemoyne College. Let's give it up for the principal of the Alcy Performing Arts Elementary School, Miss Eureka McAfee. This should be a very wonderful conversation, and all of these wonderful people have some unique perspectives to offer insofar as the subject matter is concerned. We are here today because we want to dialogue about the role and the function of Black education, and especially Black educational institutions and organizations in light of current events, and the most pressing current event in Memphis and Shelby County. And I just left from Atlanta earlier today, and I could say all around the country, the most pressing issue is what has happened here to Tyree Nichols. And so first and foremost, before we go any further, we want to lift up the family of Tyree Nichols, especially his mother and father and his siblings and his child, and we want to give a moment of silence to Tyree Nichols' honor. After we do a moment of silence for about 10 seconds, there'll be a brief video clip that we will watch, and then I'll come back and allow these panelists to introduce themselves better than I was able to introduce them, and then we'll engage in a very robust conversation. Don't forget, for those of you who are out there, or for those of you who are logged in online, if you want to submit a comment or a question for our consideration, put it in the chat. But for now, let's take about 10 seconds in honor of now the elder and ancestor Tyree Nichols. After that, we'll watch a brief clip that I think can help set the stage for the conversation we're about to have. Ashe, thank you.
I'm going to start with you. You are on the ground there in Memphis. This has been an excruciatingly tough week and weekend. Can you give us a sense of what people are telling you? What is your flock telling you? What are you hearing from those in the community about what happens and what happens next?
Well, Sister Sarah, you've been here, and I'm sure you felt and saw much of what I felt and saw and heard. Congregation members, community members talking about how frustrated they are, how much trauma we've encountered, and moreover, trying to figure out the ways to hold the police department and all of the parties involved adequately accountable and responsible for the developments. Our heart goes out to Tyree Nichols' his family, his mother, his father, his siblings, his child, and we want to do what we can to encourage everybody to stay engaged, because this is not an anomaly. This is indicative of the broader structure and system of policing in our country. And so there's a lot that needs to come from this, and we're trying to make the most of the moment.
I'm going to just let us hear for our viewers, both national and international. Tyree's mom, Rovon Wells, spoke so sorrowfully and so eloquently as she's going through this and standing in front of the world, explaining what happened. I'd like to let you hear something that she said that I think will stick with a lot of us for a long time.
I was telling someone that I had this really bad pain in my stomach earlier, not knowing what had happened. But once I found out what happened, that was my son's pain that I was feeling. That's right. And I didn't even know. But for me to find out that my son was calling my name, and I was only feet away, did not even hear him. You have no clue how I feel right there. No clue.
What we heard on the video is that her son, the last words he said were "mom, mom, mom," and he screamed it. And I asked her, do you think he was trying to actually let you hear him, because he was only about 80 yards away from the home? And she said yes, and that is what is tormenting her as much as anything, that she couldn't help him in his greatest time of need. Pastor, how do you work through this in the community? How do you work through the pain with everyone, including the family, the friends, and the community at large, who has now seen this horrific video?
Yeah, it's a gargantuan task, to say the least. We have to put the family's needs and requests and desires front and center in the way that we move. And I know several activists and organizers and community members and faith leaders have been doing that. We also have to make sure we continue to put in the context, not just what happened, but how we got here, and how it's the byproduct of so much negligence and insensitivity coming from the police department, coming from the city administration. And we have to do our best to amplify the voices of those who have been on the ground advocating for reforms for the last several years, but have been met with all manner of demonization and dismissal. So we are fighting for justice for Tyree, absolutely, but we're also fighting for justice for everybody who's encountered similar things like this. And so we put the family front and center, and even the family has articulated that this is much bigger than this incident. It's not isolated. It is part and parcel of the broader system and structure of policing that we have to challenge and change.
And I want to.
So let me first begin with my dear sister, Miss Eureka McAfee, let me first say, and I'll say this about all of y'all, like what I feel like you bring to the space. And then I want you to, comment on anything else that I might miss that you feel like you're bringing to this particular moment. And I want all of us to be thinking about what it means to know that Black spaces educate Black kids, and at their best, try to prepare us to respond to tragic moments like these. I thought about you because as a principal of an elementary school, I wondered what it was like to try to engage in conversation with some students and faculty, and then you had district folks that you had to try to balance. So can you share some about what that was like and what you feel like you're bringing to the space now, if you've learned anything from this that you didn't know prior to? But that's why I felt like you would be very valuable to this conversation in ways that others are not. And of course, because you were educated here at Lemoyne. So please tell us, your response to those unctions.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you, Dr. Fisher, for having me here. Very, very, very complex situation. Being an elementary school principal, very sensitive subject, ensuring that the conversation is going to not hurt everything that's already going on. So, of course, we were coached by the district, those topics that we were able to really touch on and those topics that we should avoid. We're dealing with kids ages 4 to 11 years old. So we wanted to make sure that we were very cognizant of just their thought process and their feelings, and making sure that if they had questions, we would not initiate the conversation. But if there were questions, we were prepped and ready to address those issues. So just thinking about the child in that manner, if he felt that he wanted to express some concern, or she, then we were ready to deal with that situation. It's almost as if, you want to avoid it. You don't want to bring it to the space, but it's what's actually going on. So we have to be prepared and equipped.
Let me just follow before I come to you, Dr. Dre. Being educated at Lemoyne, my hunch is that helped prepare you for the moment. All the things that you've been doing in your career, but especially in this moment. So would you say that I was right? And if Lemoyne did help you, can you speak to exactly how it did? Hopefully there's some students out here or some watching online, and they might want to know what they should be paying attention to in the classroom now, so that if they ever have to encounter a moment that's similar, they'll be as equipped as you have been.
Absolutely. Of course, I am a mom. I have 2 Black sons, 2 in college, one who's at the University of Tennessee at Knoxville, one at the University of Memphis. I have a 24-year-old daughter. So there's always that conversation in educating a whole child at the school level, knowing how to respond if you're ever in a situation, making sure that you have prompt your child or your children to have a conversation, to always stay calm. And so those are things that we have to deal with each and every day in the school system. It goes far beyond just the curriculum and textbooks. We are educating the whole child. So we're looking at character ed, teaching respect. That's not in the curriculum, but we know that that's important. They need to know how to respond to adults, how to respond to their peers. So that was just natural for me attending a HBCU. Culturally, I know how to have a conversation with those of different races and those of the same race. So it's very important that we have a space, create this space in the school for students to have those types of conversations.
Dr. Dre, I think, and for those who don't know, this is one of my closest colleagues, friends, mentors. So me calling him Dr. Dre is no form of disrespect. And I'm not referencing Beats by Dre either, okay? Or the producer. He's not a hip hop producer. But Dr. Johnson,
yes.
Part of what I think brings you to this space is you have been one of the most present and accounted for faith leaders at the forefront of activism related to Tyree Nichols and other events connected to it in the past, other instances connected to it in the past, but also as a researcher, having done a lot of high quality research on social movements, and especially the rhetoric of social movements, Black Lives Matter versus All Lives Matter, book that y'all edited. So I guess I want you to talk a little bit about what you have seen on the front lines as a faith leader. And also, if you could speak to how what you have encountered in the educational spaces that you have not just sat in, but also conducted as a Black professor, and how you angle those moments. Because I know you, when these things happen, you scrap whatever was on the syllabus and all of a sudden say, we got to address this. And so, matter of fact, I need to move and make a motion to Madam President that we gonna adopt Andre Johnson as an honorary alumni of
Is that all
Lemoyne
right? Is
College.
that all right?
So,
Can
so
I
he
do
can
that?
finally, claim some HBCU. No, so seriously, talk to us some about those experiences, in the classroom as a professor and on the front lines as a community leader and activist.
Well, first of all, thank you for the invitation to be on the panel, and Madam President for inviting all of us to be here on this wonderful campus. And I am indeed grateful and thankful for this opportunity just to share. Man, yeah, all what you just said is just yes. But let me I'm going to get to the faith piece about being on the ground, but I want to take your question in reverse order, because I want to just, add to what Madam Principal was saying here about education and about when real life happens, and when people want to talk about it. I teach at the University of Memphis, and I do want to just shout out just quickly the Black professors at PWIs, because you have a lot of students, Black students at these PWIs that are looking to us to have these type of conversations. And that's exactly what happened at the University of Memphis. Students had a rush meeting. We got news about this on the Friday, and then Monday, right before the ice storm, students gathered in the UC, and they really wanted to talk. They really wanted to open up. They really wanted to ask questions. And they were frustrated that professors were not forthcoming, were not, engaging enough, not talking about it enough. So that Monday night, people kind of left, kind of frustrated, and just still wanted to kind of talk about this. Ice storm Tuesday, ice storm Wednesday, ice storm Thursday, then we come back on Friday. Then I went to a faculty meeting. Faculty members at least were around saying they wanted to talk about this. They wanted to help the students because students have been coming to them, but they didn't know what to say. They didn't know how to approach it. They didn't want to offend anybody. They didn't want to say the wrong thing. So I'm in that meeting frustrated. I'm sitting around here like, what do you mean you don't know? I mean, what do your discipline teaches you? And you're right. I mean, I'm teaching right now the rhetoric of social movements. Tuesdays and Thursdays, 9:40, 11:45. You want to come, just let me know. But I'm teaching that course right now about just social movements in general. Now it's a Tyree Nichols course because, because we're talking about social movement here in Memphis, and we're talking about in each and every class period, students come with something they found out or found fascinating about what's going on here in Memphis and about social movements. And so we have reconstituted the syllabus to speak to the issue that is pertinent right now. And I think that is the best way to educate. That's the best pedagogical understanding that professors can have to speak, to bring theory to real life or to bring the method down to real life. And the students are getting it. The students are enjoying it. And the students are now feeling as if they are part of a move, even if they have never been out on a street corner, hold up a sign, march or whatever. They feel now by doing their papers and their research, they feel as if they are part, and that's probably going to lead them, hopefully, because I do believe in embodied protest. I think, I mean, you know, at least once you need to come on a street corner, hold up a sign and just say justice for Tyree. I mean, just one time. I mean, you don't have to march, you don't have to do anything, shut down anything, but embodied protest is important. Bodies matter. Bodies matter. So, and eventually they'll get out there. But we have to have space and place for people to talk about their frustration. And when you start opening it up, man, you're going to get real surprised quickly, because a lot of people been wrestling with this for a long period of time, and they open up to you like never before. And guess what else happens? The students begin to trust the professor. Professor begin to trust students, and then you can journey together and you can learn together. Oh, you care about us enough to let us just vent out? Yeah, let's talk about this thing. We're not, scrap syllabus, that's out. We're going to just talk about, how did you feel when that video came out? How did you feel? Because we did not meet during the Ice Dome. I lost a whole week to really prep and prepare and to do the things. But I was at home because I already knew that I was going to do this. So yes, I think it's important, especially at PWIs, because what we found out at the University of Memphis, and I'm sure around the country, is that a lot of spaces and places do not afford an opportunity for a lot of students to talk. And I'm talking about white students too. They wanted to talk about this stuff, and and professors just didn't know.
So I think you touched on the second part too, which is the embodiment piece. And so I do want to do a follow-up in a way that I think is going to pitch to Mickell as well. And let me also say, to me, Black professors at a PWI, salute to you for doing it, but you got a little cover if you don't. Shame on Black professors at HBCUs.
Are you saying that
I don't know. I ain't in
okay.
everybody's classroom, right? But I'm saying,
Right,
I think what you are modeling is something that Black professors should be committed to, especially at HBCUs. But one of the things I know you did, and this is what leads me to, Brother Mickell, but I want you to talk about it from a pedagogical and philosophical standpoint. There was a city council meeting or a county commission meeting, I think it was.
No, city council.
It was a city council meeting.
Early in the morning.
Early in the morning, you decided to have your class watch the city council meeting.
Yeah.
Right? Now, how do you do that? Or what is it like doing that in a state where public policy says you might get in trouble for teaching critical race theory?
Well, I turned on the video and it was just there. I wasn't saying anything. Chief of police and the chief of the fire department were being questioned by city council. I thought it would be a great pedagogical move in order to let the students see what civic engagement was all about. I believe in public discourse and civil discourse. And when you open up spaces and places where people, the public, can actually see their representatives actually working and asking questions, I think that was a great opportunity for everybody in the class never been to a city council meeting. And guess what they want to do now? Field trip. Because my class, again, 9:40. So right in that, when the city council have their committee meetings in the morning, they're open to the public. And now they want to try to go and just sit and just look. And so if education is all about, if rhetorical education, rhetorical pedagogy for a moment, is all about creating a public or creating a person to engage into the public and using her voice or his voice or their voice to speak out and to speak up and to engage in the demos on the public, then that's exactly what we were trying to do in that class that morning. And I think it really engaged the students so much so now that we are trying to maybe plan to meet at city council for class and and watch them live and in person.
Yes, salute to you for that. Mr. Chairman, a couple of things I think bring you to the space. Of course, one of the more notable alumni of Lemoyne, former SGA president, former member of the 20-0 starting basketball team. They started 20-0. They didn't win the championships like we did, but they did start out 20-0, and that was historical. And so I respect that, salute to that. And he's been an OG for me since I got here, even though he plays the wrong fraternity, but it's nothing but love.
The greatest fraternity.
So we start talking about public policy. Y'all, this is Fireside Chat, so this is how to go. And don't forget, if you got any comments or things that you want to add, make sure you are logged into the stream on social media and you submit your comments or your questions there. But public policy is part of what got us here, whether it be what's happening with policing, whether it be, where money is going in certain neighborhoods, things that you have had a lot of experience with and now have a great deal of influence over. And as I think about Principal McAfee, the budget for education is in the hands of the county commission. So that's what I believe brings you to the space, the perspective where you can share what it's like to engage in, harm reduction from a public policy standpoint. And how has being educated at an HBCU helped prepare you for the role that you're serving in now?
Sure. Well, thank you, Earl. Well, Dr. Fish. All right. First, thanks for having me. And let me just say here, thank you, Principal McAfee and Dr. Drury for what you do as well, because, I have 3 daughters and 2 of them are in grade school, and one is in grad school, and the influence that people like you are going to have on their lives, not someone like what I do. They're going to be people in my roles. They're going to be people who always remember you for what you do. So thank you for that. But, I appreciate the question. It's coming from a different perspective, right? The education is in our hands, $600 million to be exact, for a little bit over for a $1.4 billion budget. And it's never enough money. It's never enough money. Wish we could always do more when it comes to that. But we are here now to the point where it's like, what can we do differently? What have we not done right in the past? Unfortunately, it takes situations like these sometimes to say, okay, we need to turn that on its ear altogether. And even something we just did recently, which is, last night, which is going to get a lot of interesting comments in the paper and the media because it has the words reparations around it, but it's about, okay, what are we doing differently? The same things do not work, but we're now taking a look at what does it mean specifically as it relates to Tyree Nichols and law enforcement, things of that nature, is what policy can we put in place at the end of the different policy standpoint when it comes to officers, law enforcement, the right training they have in place. And again, that doesn't mean there's no magic wand for any of this. That doesn't mean that tomorrow we're not going to have bad actors at part of police enforcement. We're not going to have any more police brutality. But what we can at least ensure is that we have policy in place. There's going to be no gray area when you break rules. Even, for example, I'll tell you one thing that you mentioned the city council, that the city council and us may be looking at is having some type of joint understanding. Just say, for example, if a police officer has been sanctioned or been demoted at the MPD, well, if we don't let them quit their job at MPD, come on over to the sheriff's department and ascend over there, right? Those are 2 different companies. That's like, that's like saying FedEx and UPS. That's different. But we're talking about having an understanding to where the public safety is as important, right? So if you breach that trust, don't come over here trying to think that you're going to escape the things you've done over there. So that's some things that we got to look at from a policy standpoint. You always wonder what we can do differently. And right now we're looking at ordinances when it comes to traffic stops. We're looking at, again, different ordinances and
Data transparency, right? Which is akin to what you're talking about now. So if a officer is involved in impropriety, then the data is already out there, and so they won't be able to easily just transfer from one department to the other.
And we make the data available to the public.
Right.
That's what's important. So that's where the space that I'm in. So what can I do for the time I have on the county commission to at least say that we put some policy in place to ensure that people are safer than they were yesterday, and that there's a better level of understanding, hopefully, between law enforcement and our citizens.
Can you circle back around to, your time at Lemoyne? If I remember correctly, you majored in business,
I did.
right? So how is that time? How has your time here? And I mean, your dad is a notable alum, right? So you're a legacy Lemoyneite, right?
Yeah, definitely.
So what did Lemoyne do to prepare you for the moment that you're in insofar as political leadership is concerned in moments like this?
Yeah, I wish I could tell you just in 1 or 2 words. I've been sitting here thinking about that, because sometimes what's prepared is the unspoken. When things happen, and again, I'll date myself about as things that happened to where I was in college, when we had influential moments, especially when it comes to racial. Say what you want to say. I remember the day I was when they announced the OJ case. Yeah, I'm old for some of y'all folks back there. Y'all weren't even around back then, but I remember where I was. I was in the student center, and I remember where I was, where certain people, influential people in my life, were unfortunately shot, and whatever it may be. And when you talk about Tupac and you're talking about Biggie, I was here. So it was never a doubt that that was going to be spoken about. It was never a doubt that I walked into the student center and I know what you were feeling, what I was feeling. I wasn't worried about if you're going to bring it up or not. I wasn't worried about if my professors were going to bring it up or not. So what Lemoyne prepared me for that is sometimes the empathy, it goes without saying. And unfortunately, we don't have that. You just mentioned that at your institution and maybe other places, students are wondering, are we going to have the conversation? In corporate America, we wonder, are we going to mention that about what happened with Tyree Nichols? Speaking of that, Tyree Nichols worked at FedEx. So you wonder, is that going to be brought up? There was never a doubt at Lemoyne College that if something happened that had to do with Black folks, that we're going to talk about it. So what prepared me for that was to understand that that's our responsibility in the other spaces we walk into. This was a safe space. But if you walk out of the space, it's our responsibility to make sure those conversations are held no matter where we are.
Yeah, so man, salute to y'all. Give it up for all of these wonderful panelists so far. And again, if you have a question or a comment that you want to be entertained, make sure you are on Facebook, on the Lemoyne College Facebook page, and submit it there, and we can try to entertain it. You just described something, Mickell, about how fearless these encounters can be. Like, somebody's gonna say something. And so I want to try to make our conversation a little bit more fearless too. All of us have different perspectives and angles that we bring to this moment as we are responding to a community full of all kind of anxieties and emotions and traumas. What do you think from your vantage point, whether it be as a principal, whether it be as a educator, whether it be as an elected official, what do you think we as a community are missing about this moment? This is more popcorn. I'm not directing it at anybody who feels led to just jump in and we can, vibe off each other in that way. What do you think we as a community are missing in this moment about what's happening?
I'll take a stab at that one. I think one of the things that we're missing is that the actual conversation, it's a process when we're talking about trauma, death, pain in the Black community. A lot of times it's hard for our children to articulate their pain. The space hadn't been created because they've been taught to be strong. Don't let anyone else see you cry. You're not weak. And so I think it's a process. So, and it goes beyond that feeling. So first we have to accept it. A lot of times we can turn the blind eye, but once we accept that, and then you have to be receptive to the support for dealing with that pain and that trauma. There has to be space made to have the conversation. Sometimes we can live in denial that occurred. You can turn a blind eye again, but creating that space, understand that it's a process, and then the follow through. Whatever supports and resources are necessary, or do you even know how to receive the resources and supports? And once I've gone through that, now it's my turn to internalize and process my feelings and be able to help the next person out and have a conversation and say, I dealt with this. Here are some things that you can do. So once we experience these things, it's important for us to create a space and to also share those experiences with other people, because the questions are there, but a lot of time we just hold it on the inside. It is okay not to be okay. We have to be okay. Me being a leader of a school, I have to put on this strong face every day. I have to walk into the building. I am the leader. I'm responsible for 695 students and 100 adults. So when we're talking about pain, we have to create that space and let them know that it's okay not to be okay. And so they have to understand that they can trust me and come to me and have that conversation. But they have to know that it's okay not to be okay.
You know, I put on social media just the other day, has there been any, you know, town halls, any kind of talk, and knowing that this was coming.
Right.
But that's why I put the question out there. Remember George Floyd? It seemed like every institution, every governmental body, every individual, if you had any kind of power or prestige in the public, everybody at least made a statement. They came out with a statement. They came out, you know, people wanted to look for, you know, places in which, hey, I got this money. Can I give this to you to help out? And I mean, all of those type of things. And I get it. That was in Minneapolis, and we were in COVID. We were shut down. And everybody saw that, as we talked about today in class, that slow motion death, 9 minutes, 29 seconds, knee on neck. And that shook us as a country like never before. I get it. But at least right here in Memphis, I mean, just as horrific, just as problematic, just as cruel and heinous and just downright nasty was the death of Tyree Nichols. Yeah. And my question was, are we even talking about it enough? Now we have activists out, you know, we got people coming to city council, county commission meetings. We have stuff going on, but are we tired of talking? Or are we really, because I really believe as somebody who calls himself a pessimistic prophet at times, I really do believe at this particular moment right now is our moment to do something.
So we should be
big.
pushing harder.
Right. We should be having, because we've been having these conversations, as we talked about, for a long period of time. And thank God now that our elected officials and other governmental agencies and bodies and other people who have been pushing more police are finally listening to, well, maybe there's another way. And now we have that moment. And I don't think we're talking enough. So I'm thankful for Lemoyne on, Madam President, to have this discussion and to live stream it. And this could be the beginning of those type of discussions, because people have been producing ideas and plans for a long period of time, and people just have not been listening. And I think now we got an opportunity that people will at least give us a
I want to press this, and anybody can respond to this too. And I know, Mickell, even if you have some comments on that, and I got a follow up for Principal McAfee too. But Dr. Dre, do you think part of the reason we're not as aggressive in talking about it is because of the racial dynamics here? 5 black officers, whereby George Floyd and Derek Chauvin, you had the white-black dichotomy. It was a lot more clear, and now it's a lot more complicated, and people can't use some of the same tacit talking points that they tend to use. So is that the reason? I think it has something to do with, of course, the COVID dynamic too. Everybody being forced to watch it. Forced, you can't run to the basketball game. You can't run to the movies. You couldn't run to the restaurant. You had to sit there. And so, you know, do you think, or do we think, that the racial dynamic is part of what has people not as aggressively talking about it?
Yes, I think a little bit, and I'll be real short on this because I know we probably gonna circle back around this. But see, this again is the conversation that we need to be. We have been trying to tell folk forever that It is not about the color. This is not about race. This is a systemic issue.
Mhm.
And just because you have a black face do not mean that they are not part of the systemic issues and problems that can happen if you allow the systemic environment to overtake you. And we could talk all day long. I'm just itching to talk about anti-blackness and a whole
Yes.
lot of other stuff that we really can talk about that grounds itself into this white supremacy belief system.
Mhm.
And it's not white people individually, it's the system. We have been talking about that. So now is a time, okay,
Mhm.
so you calm down. It's not a white officer now, it's black officers. Now will you listen?
Mm.
Because that same energy we've been giving to white, when it was a white officer, we're giving it to because
Yeah.
it's the black officers too.
Yeah.
The same energy. The people on the ground have not changed.
Right.
Other folk have.
Yeah. Sure enough. Sure enough.
Man, I could sit here and listen to, you know, this could be a discussion with the two of you.
No.
No, seriously. I mean, I'm sitting up here listening, and you know, I think that's one of the traits that we all need to be doing is listening sometimes and hearing these spaces. But I definitely think it's the racial aspect of it all. You see, obviously with George Floyd, you had a white officer, so white folks felt guilty.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Even if you just like, well, what could I do? Even employ white people to say, what could I do? So therefore, I mean, how much money did we start seeing being given to HBCUs from corporations, things of that nature?
Yeah.
We had, I mean, the corporate community stepped up like, hey.
I don't know if that's stepping up though.
Well,
There was still crumbs.
And done more than they have in the past.
Yes,
Yeah.
but that's a low. Can we agree that that was a low
Oh,
bar
of course,
to start with?
of course.
And I used to say, you know, white economic anxiety is at an all-time high, right? Like, they
Right.
were, please
Right.
take some of the money, black folks, please. Right?
Oh, of course.
Yeah.
It's never going to be equal to revenue and profits around
Yeah,
here. But,
yeah, right.
you know, I say that from that mean is that they stepped up to say, I don't want you to single me out.
Yes.
That's what I mean
Yeah.
by that. They
Yeah.
stepped that. Don't single us out. We
Right.
did this over here too. We did this over
Right.
here. And then again, we're not talking about long-term effects, right? But again, people did what made them feel good at the time.
Mhm.
This isn't the case right here because of the racial aspect of it. So the white people say, they say, oh man, that's terrible. You know, I mean, I'm just.
Oh,
I'm
those
just
poor black people.
Yeah, I'm just, yeah,
Yeah.
it's terrible.
Oh, wow.
And
Yeah.
I'm not saying that I'm empathetic. I'm just saying that's just what happened. But they don't feel obligated to do anything.
Mm.
So now, and unfortunately, and then, you know, this may not, you know, you could disagree with this, but we're in a safe space. This is home for me, right?
yeah,
This is why you invited me up here, right? I'm not
Sure
the
enough.
professor, right?
Sure
So, you know, so this is why you invited me up here. But at the same time, it's a culture issue.
All right.
Because a lot of us saw that video and recognized what that looked like. We recognized that has egos involved. We recognize that this seems personal. It recognized like, that don't seem right. They know this young man or something like that. So unfortunately, the jury's still out. Because a lot of people think there's something still behind what happened to that young man.
Could that be? Yes, people do think that, but could that be because of our, what we would call in academic spaces, cognitive dissonance relative to what's happening with, as Dr. Johnson was talking about, the system and structure of policing itself? And could it be because of how everything was presented to us? So I'm gonna pitch this to you, Madam Principal, because, you know, people are in the chat even asking like, so you said you were prepped by the district or coached by the district, and people want to, you know, kind of know what that means. But tell me what you think about this. I felt like we missed an opportunity when we did not have school on that Friday when the video was released. I felt like it should have been intentionally presented as a moment to educate the community on what was happening and safe spaces and how to create all of that stuff. So I guess I'm saying, one, what was this notion of you being coached, and in what way were you coached? And do you think that the way that it was presented left space for all of this speculation that people in our community have about what has happened and what hasn't happened, even if it is documented that what we are speculating about is not true? Even if the family has said, no, it's not true, we still want to speculate on it. And I wonder if it's because of how it was rolled out, and in part how it was rolled out from an educational standpoint.
Well, honestly, Dr. Fisher, I was really actually glad that we did have to go to school, just
Okay,
being
okay,
honest.
that's good.
And not so much as the coaching, but just the material, because it was a very sensitive situation. And so a lot of times just in the school, especially with elementary school kids, you really have to be very careful with the things that you expose them to, which it was something they were all going to see. But when you're talking about, we don't want to get into our personal issues. So we want to make sure we stay with what's in black and white, centered around that manner. We don't want to make it a personal issue. So making sure that we're looking at it from a philosophical point, making sure the facts that are present, that you're looking at just simply that. And so it was kind of safe. It was a safety mechanism for the school system, because everyone has their own different perspective and their thought process. So in the classroom, especially with teachers and educators having that liberty to take their discourse, so you have to be careful with that. So that's what's very important.
I definitely, and
because sometimes you don't even follow the curriculum,
Well, I think that's part of what we kind of discussing insofar as what it means to be leaders, Black folk in leadership, and mindful of the particular context of being tasked with responding to Black trauma and Black pain and Black death. And that we don't always have the luxury of just following the guidelines. But at the same time, and that's the difficult dance, I think these are things that we can say all of us have learned to some degree in the spaces that we've been in, whether it's nurtured in Black churches or nurtured in Black institutions, where they kind of teach you, you find your way to make sure your people's needs are met, even as you walk the tightrope of the Black and white. Nobody should expect for you to violate the rules and the standards of the Memphis Shelby County school system, right? But people will also expect us. Nobody expects for you to violate the Shelby County Constitution, but people also expects us to find a way. Right. If it's anything Black institutions are tasked to do, it's cultivate Black ingenuity such that we find a way to do what our people need for us to do. So let me just pivot it this way. Where is Black leadership missing the mark? Whether it be in the classroom, whether it be in the community, whether it be in civic spaces, because hey, all of us can point to folks who are Black in skin only. And many of them are in positions of leadership, some at Black institutions. And now in moments like this, maybe that's why we're so silent, or maybe that's why the conversation is so complicated and confusing. So where are Black leaders missing the mark? Don't get unfearless now.
This is the question why I should listen. I'm gonna listen. I'm gonna listen.
Well, going back to something the chairman said about maybe the race, and it's the race of the folk. Dr. Earl, you've already said it this week when you were in Atlanta, and you've been saying it for a while. Maybe this is the moment where Black Memphis comes together to offer confession and say, hey, you know what? We messed up here. And the reason why is, again, we have been talking for a long period of time to ministers, to Black leaders, the business owners, to college students, and especially faculty and staff. And the problem with this whole Tyree Nichols thing is in the brutal way that he was beaten and killed, is that a lot of Black folk wanted more police officers. A lot of Black folk wanted Scorpion. Is this
amen, somebody? I can't get no help up in here.
No, right. No. A lot of Black folk wanted these TAC units. And folk like me and Dr. Earl and others have been saying, wait a minute, hold up, we're just not talking about how we feel. We bring in research.
Yeah.
We bring in documentation. We say, this is what happens when this happens. And now we're sitting here and everybody's hurt and mad and disgusted. A lot of people believe that Chief Davis misrepresented and all of that. Now is the time though.
Mhm.
Own that. Just own it. Sit in it
Yeah.
for a moment. And I'm deadly serious. Just sit in the fact that, look, man, we maybe overfund and made the folk that were trying to go around say defund, and you knew what they meant, and you lied. You knew what they meant. They were not talking about getting rid of police. They were saying, stop funding all the money that we have going to policing, and they are beating and butchering black and brown folk. You knew what they were saying, and you still did it. And we need to just sit in that for a moment. I talked about this Sunday. We got to sit in that. What is this anti-blackness that we can get? It can get all inside of us, and we can buy into. The very first thing that I saw when I saw that video, I said, "Man, white supremacists were happy."
Yeah.
When they saw that. That was like, great job.
Yeah. We taught you Negroes well.
That's it. And if we buy into that, there's nothing left. There's nothing left. We cannot, but we have to love us. We got to love us. And when we do that, then we can begin to have the conversations that we really need to have. And we can see it again. We can reimagine what policing and what public safety can look like in this city, which is a majority black city to begin with. We cannot keep doing the same thing and expecting different results, and then showing up for the press conference shocked, and just hurt and disappointed when this happened again and again and again. And start believing black folk. Black truth matters.
Yes, sir.
Right before, when this came out, how many other people start coming like, hey, I filed a report about this same guy the week before, or they did this to me. We got a hotline, the ministerial, the clergy alliance. We got this hotline.
Mm-hmm.
People are calling all times of day and night, telling about their stories. Come on, y'all. Sooner or later, we got to start believing these folk and start to do things differently.
Amen. Amen. Here's what I think I hear us saying, and I want to hear more from Mickell about this from a public policy standpoint. I think I hear us saying something I heard one of my colleagues say this week on the panel I was on, Reverend Mike McBride, Live Free Campaign, Oakland, California, said, you got a whole lot of folks who want to lead black folks but don't love black folks. Mm-hmm. You got black leaders who don't love black people. And so I wonder if we have adopted the ideology of anti-blackness or white supremacy such that even black leaders don't feel obligated. So here we are at the historic HBCU. And I think it should be explicitly clear that our commitment is to the edification and the empowerment and the nurturing of the next generation of black leaders. Unapologetic black affirmation, unapologetic black liberation. And I think we can honestly say, because of stuff that gets passed in public policy, CRT, so right, you even have people in the chat asking like, so how do we teach this without violating CRT? Or how do we create public policy that can be more affirming for Black folks. I think maybe the reparations piece is something in that direction. But are we misinterpreting the level of anti-Blackness that's in public policy?
That's a tough one right there. I mean, this city obviously is majority Black, and obviously our leaders are majority Black.
And the county is majority Black.
Majority Black. And I can tell you, the fact that thinks that there's anti-Blackness from our Black leaders, that's scary. I mean, that really is, because Black folks will put you there, right? At the end of the day, from a voting standpoint.
But there's some that get put there and it ain't really Black folk who put them there.
Listen, like I said, like I mentioned about law enforcement, there's gonna be bad actors there. There's gonna be bad actors who are elected officials.
But you said to the ones who it's unequivocally Black folk put you there.
Yeah, no doubt. No doubt. So that's why when we put together policy, I'm unapologetic about it, but it's at the same time, I understand I represent a large sector of people. So you mentioned reparation, but we also what's coming next is also a legislation as far as Black history being taught in schools. Now, we know that's federal policy and state policy, but that means we try to speak from a voice. Well, what can we influence here in Shelby County? Again, we need help from the state. We need help from the federal when it comes to those things. But I tell you, this commission that I sit on right now, you have 8 Black members. And that's never happened before. 5 of those members are female, Black African-American females. That's never happened before. We recognize that this is a historic commission, that we're going to do some things that may get overturned. Quite frankly, we may be sued. We've done that before. In MWE program, we try to put in how much money is going to be spent with Black-owned businesses. Well, obviously, there's powers that be don't like that. They took us to court, and unfortunately, they won. But we're going right back at that. So, Earl, we just got to keep pushing the envelope, pushing forward, because no one's going to give anything to us, even though we're elected officials. At the end of the day, we may have a majority Black elected officials, but the only power we really have is political power. That's the only power we have here in this county and this city. And what we got to do is use that to turn this county and city on its ear. And some of those things get thrown right back at our face. But that doesn't mean we keep trying.
So maybe we should do a better job of amplifying the voices of those most directly impacted by some of the public policy. Again, Principal McAfee, I think about the 650 kids you said. People in the chat are asking, like, what are some of the conversations that you have heard some of the children engage in around, I would say, not just Tyree and what happened there, but I know something about being in Black institutions with kids. You hear stories about all kind of stuff that's happening in their houses, in their families, in their communities. And so what can you responsibly share with us that may add some insight to, what we should make sure we're teaching, or how we should make sure we're teaching and training teachers at HBCUs, or how we should make sure we're advocating for public policy?
Oh, that's a great question. So one of the things that I really push at my school is self-love. We have daily announcements each and every day. So like for the entire month of February, it's the national anthem that's being played. So we don't just single out a certain culture. We are going to embrace every culture. I have Hispanic students, African-American students at my school. So it's important to create that space again. So when there are opportunities there each and every day, and we have to be consistent in these practices. We just can't do it in February or do it at the beginning of the school year. So it becomes a culture. Now students want to come on the intercom with Ms. McAfee. So now—
And do the Pledge of Allegiance? I mean, do the Star Spangled Banner?
No, we're playing our Black national anthem.
Okay.
Yes.
Maybe I just heard that. Did she say Star?
No.
She said Star Spangled.
She said national anthem.
National
but you
anthem.
didn't.
Oh,
yeah,
okay.
right. We were doing right.
Because I was envisioning, a fourth graders taking a knee in the classroom, and I was like, please, right? Okay. I see what you're saying.
Yeah,
but that made me think of something else too.
And they're on the intercom, so they're having the opportunity each and every day. At first, it started off with just girls. So I had a male teacher to come up, and he said, "Ms. McAfee, the young men are feeling some type of way." I said, "Okay, let me think about this." And so even just being a female principal, I really had to create a space to bring my males in. So now The young men on Tuesdays and Thursdays, young ladies Monday, Wednesday, Friday. I wasn't cognizant of that. I was just thinking, me, I have the girls with me. So now they're coming to me. They're asking, Miss McAfee, can we play this song on the intercom? Can we play this song? So they're actually teaching me about different things. And so now that space has been created. So when they come down to my office from 8:10 until 8:20 for morning announcements, once we finish those announcements, I'm telling them, love yourself, listen to your teachers, make sure you follow all the rules. How was your day? They're telling Miss McAfee, I feel sad. My uncle was shot last night. That's why I was crying. And I'm like, give me a hug. You know, I said, I feel your pain. I said, but you know what? It's important that you come here and get your education so you can change that narrative, you know, so you can make a difference. That's just a conversation that we're having. Nothing prompt, nothing prep, but they're going to bring it to you. So you have to create a space. You have to first know your students that you're serving. Know the community. That's what's important. Hear them and listen. Just like Mickell stated, sometimes you just have to listen and observe. So it's important to have those conversations and be consistent, because once you start something with children, they're looking forward to it. So I think, again, like you said, a lot of talk about it, but we have to put some actions behind it. So making sure whatever I implement is something that's going to be consistent, even if I'm not the principal at that school, making sure that, hey, this is something that we do, creating that culture and climate to where even if I'm not in the building at 8:10, we know what's going to happen. We know the students are going to come down. And so now they are more, you know, opening up more. They're feeling comfortable, because you have to build their trust. Students have to first know that you care. So that's the one thing, me, especially attending the HBCU, you have to have self-love. You got to have self-love, and you have to let your students know that it's okay to love yourself, and it's okay to be nice and compliment others. And so we have to create that culture and climate. Now, I make it a public thing to compliment teachers. I let them know that, even getting the parents involved. So it's just a lot of trust issues right now in creating that space and making sure that they understand it's okay to love self. So you have to create that culture and be consistent with it and be fair.
I think I can accent one of the things that you said that may be one of the most valuable things we've heard tonight. I'm gonna accent it. Since we're in the space we're in, you really just described what we would call in African American studies, Africana ways of knowing. When you said, and those kids teach me. In more European centered, in more white educational spaces, it's not expected that the professor would learn anything from the student. But in Africana ways of knowing, the communal nature, this when you talk about self-love and all that, when you are nurtured in a community, it is expected that we learn from each other, no matter what your standing is, whether you're an elder or one of the younger people, anybody who knows anything about the ritual of libation. When you are calling forth and acknowledging who the elders and the ancestors are, those who are present, those who are here in the past, and those who are yet to come, you don't just ask permission from the elders to speak. You got to ask permission from the youngest person in the room to speak. That's a posture of humility that I think you described, and I wanted us to take a moment just to accent that. We only have a few minutes left. Y'all know I could talk to y'all Negroes all night, but I want to encourage people to continue to put comments and questions in the chat. If you're watching us on Facebook Live, we will take some of them, even though they may like seem out of order. It's going to kind of be popcorn in a way, so that we can honor them. But I do want to circle back around to this notion of Black leadership and what we may be missing. Here's one question that somebody posed, and I think it's important for all of us to at least try to take a stab at this. And I don't think it's a right or wrong answer here, but I think it's important for people to hear from each person in terms of their perspective. So there's a professor here who's asking, in light of the historical trauma that Black folks have faced, do you think we should have released the video at all?
Wow.
Yes. You can't, we talk about truth. Truth is always important at all times. I saw the video before it was released, and you have one of those moments to say, should this be released or should it not be released? And what comes to be most important is that people need to see the truth. People didn't want the video released, in my opinion, because they were afraid of the outcomes. That's why school was not in session the very next day. People were afraid. And I had people at the county, they called us, said the city shut down. And in fact, I tell you, downtown was a ghost town.
Yep.
I was downtown, was on the streets there, and I tell you, there was no one on the streets. People were afraid. So people not wanting to see the video release, I think, were afraid. And number one, but two, if it was a white officer, people wouldn't not want the video released. It would be a given. Imagine if there were white officers and we're not going to release the video. That wouldn't even be a conversation. So we can't treat it differently because the officers were black. And I thought people thought that would be a stain on our city. It is. I thought they would think that people.
You think the video is the stain?
Oh yeah.
Or what happened in the video is the stain?
Well, that's what I'm talking about.
Okay.
I'm talking about the actions that took place. Yeah,
I ain't trying to.
No, I'm
do
with you.
semantics
No,
with
with
you.
you. Yeah. What happens is a stain, obviously, and the world being able to see it.
Yes.
I thought people would look at Memphis a little bit differently. But that's something we got to deal with in ourselves. Like I said, we're a proud city, but we got some culture issues here that we got to deal with. So I'm of the opinion that it should have been released. And while we're talking about this too, I do have to say that I'm also proud of the fact that people are continually not only been indicted, but we continue to hear about anybody else being involved with that are pending, either getting suspended or what happened. I mean, that hadn't done before in the past. We see these things in the issue. We wonder, well, what's going to happen to them? Will they get off? Will they be fired? They've been suspended without pay. There have been some actions here, unfortunately, that we can look back and say, okay, we see some movement, and there's movement continuing to happen. So I'm under the opinion that it should have been released. I'm glad it was released because now it's in our face, and what are we going to do about it? We don't get to talk about reparations at county commission without things like this happen. We don't get to talk about things that help out black people without people seeing these things, and then some white folks saying, okay, let me let that ride. All right.
I can't stop from talking about it this time. Others, do you think, pros and cons of the video being released?
I thought you were going to ask another question, but no, I agree. But go ahead. I just say yes.
I agree, but when I watched that video, I was thinking, and I still have questions. I was thinking about those officers, and my question was why? Yeah. Because I can see them as former students 23 years ago when I started.
Yeah. Dr. Dre, that's your intro. Because you've been saying, who your teacher? Who your parent? Right?
So, I mean, I taught 5th grade for 17 years, and having that conversation daily, this is how we treat one another. What were they thinking to make them think that that was okay? What have they been taught to let them think that it was okay? So my thought was, what did I do or what could I have done to assist and aid? So that was the question for me, because I could have taught those young men. And so I'm always thinking about the gaps between elementary school and middle school. Yeah. Had an opportunity to teach in middle school. And even I have students now who will reach out to me on Facebook and say, Miss McAfee, I'm not the same person I was when I was in your 5th grade class. I'm like, tell me more. How did your character change? So strengthening the character ed in the elementary sector to ensure that those things, something on the inside should have said, why? No. So just some questions like thinking about character. Why?
So I'll turn this into a town hall of sorts at the risk of people, at the risk of somebody, for example, blurting out. We'll turn this into a town hall, which would give some people in the audience an opportunity to come to the podium and ask a question. But I got to set some parameters here. Okay. You cannot go on in perpetuity, which is one of those higher ed words that means forever. Okay. So before you come to the podium, please formulate your question Okay, your question, don't spend a minute giving a comment. Formulate your question before you get here, and then we'll give you a good, 30, 45 seconds to ask the panel a question. So this will be town hall style in that regard. But I also want to highlight a question for starters that comes directly from one of the students. And they are asking, as a student of Lemoyne, what's something as a young adult that they can do if they may not be in a position to change things, but at least want to help to change things? Where would we say they could start?
The Lemoyne folk want to answer that one?
You the honorary Lemoyne on guy now, right?
Right,
Don't
you
be.
have an answer, but
About to
I
say
want
don't.
to give them an
Okay,
opportunity
all right,
first, yeah,
all right.
I'll
Okay.
answer, but because I just had the same conversation with the students over at Southwest Community College,
Mhm.
and it remained, and they look just like everybody in this room, so it remains the same. It obviously it's not being silent. It's speaking up. It's holding informationals and talks just like this.
Mhm.
Any change that's happened, and it just dates us all, but any significant change has started with young people. Now, they had elders and mentors, but it's been young people who've been unapologetic and unafraid and nothing to lose that got out there on the front lines and said these things aren't right, and probably endured a lot of those things that helped it better for all of our generations. So I tell students, do not be silent.
Yeah.
Make your voices heard. Partner with the mentor. Come ask us questions at the city council or county commission or wherever it may be. I tell you, people are wanting to hear from young people when it comes to these issues. So use whatever platform you may have here, whether if it's your classroom, whether if you're in a fraternity or sorority, where if you play sports, whatever it may be, utilize it. You have a platform wherever you are. You have a spirit influence wherever you are. Use it. That's where it starts.
No, and I echo that. My writing partner and I, Amanda Neal Egger at the University of Memphis, we just yesterday got word that our new book, The Summer of 2020, George Floyd and the Resurgence of Black Lives Matter, will be published next year, spring 2024. Got that news.
That
And
man
thank-
publishes stuff like the mixtape Lil Wayne. Okay, every week it's a new publication.
But we actually talk about in chapter 5 of the book, which is the politics chapter of the book, we talk about involvement. And what we have demonstrated through our research is the number one way to get young people involved in just about anything that you might deem as positive in the public arena. They have to be involved in a movement. Period. That's it. If they get involved, if they really get involved, not just tangible, not just on social, but if they are part of an embodied protest, if they are part of a bearing witness campaign on the street corner, if they are continually calling and emailing their representatives, they feel a part of the process. They will vote. They will help others to vote. They will help others to, they will feel as if they will have to educate their friends, their relatives, their parents, especially if their parents may be a little bit different politically than they are. If they get involved, that's the key. That's it. Get involved in a movement. In a movement, you can call it the movement if you're just looking at Black liberation movement, but any movement. If they get involved with women's movement, gender issues, they get LGBTQIA movement. Any movement brings a level of commitment to the public arena. And if they do that, they will find them, you will find them in the classrooms here and at the University of Memphis, Rose, CBU, wherever. They will be leading the efforts within the classroom. They may even bring a couple of professors along.
Yeah.
Because they now know that it is important to do the things that they are doing. And the only way that things, as you were just saying, only way that things change is from the bottom up. From the bottom up. And young people have led us. And that's just the history of social movements in every context. And I'll stop there because I do have one more other thing, but I know we want to get to some more questions.
Yeah, and I just want to
and some
piggyback
comments
that
from the
with,
others.
I think the classroom is a great space for students to shape their voice, that they should be challenging their professors.
Hey.
Like, start there.
But our discipline invites that. Our discipline teaches, and one of the reasons why I'm not too concerned about
CRT
CRT and all of those type of things, because the courses I teach, first and foremost, are going to be courses where we are actually studying speeches. I teach African American rhetoric. I teach Black church. I teach Black homily. I mean, my courses are Black. So anytime you take a course from me, you are going to read a Frederick Douglass or Ida B. Well, and I don't have to say anything. I just read. Okay, tell me what you think. And all of a sudden,
like what they doing
that's
today.
it.
But consider this. Earlier we were thinking about like so two things: the pros and cons of releasing the video. I mean, that sounds like a conversation that should be happening in the classroom.
Sure.
But
that we teach is the controversy. That's the
Yeah.
controversy. So the controversy.
I don't think,
that.
but Dre, I don't think it has to be in that discipline. So
we talk about okay.
Yeah.
I was just lifting up our discipline as a natural fit for that.
So when
you're right.
Principal McAfee says something about wondering, you know, where the investigation was and so on and so, that's a criminal justice conversation. Folks who are in criminal justice classes should be having that conversation
That's
right now.
Yep.
Where are we in the investigation? Why was
Law
this
school.
officer? Why was this officer fired? But you know, these officers fired, but this officer is under. Well, you should know something about policy, right? So I don't see how. I almost forgot I was the moderator. I just, you know, I don't see how we don't take better advantage of these opportunities, especially at Black institutions.
Okay.
Especially at Black institutions. So, you know, we could discuss more about the pros and the cons piece. We could discuss a little bit more about, you know, how we are, where we are in some of those other things. But especially all of us, I think, have displayed a commitment to try to create a space where young people, students here at Lemoyne and beyond, can have a voice and a platform so that they can continue to develop their own character as they move forward. Again, well, I want to try to save a few more minutes because we are really at the limit of our time, but we could probably get started late, maybe another, with the permission of Madam President, another 5 or 10 minutes. Anybody wants to come up and offer a concise question, we would appreciate it. For the sake of the camera, for people who are watching online, please just come up to this podium and we'll give you the mic and you could ask your question there. While the professor's coming, anybody else with another comment about things that we've covered up to this point?
He's up here now because I am going to say something.
Yeah, I'm not going to ask a question. I want to make a comment because I asked a question in regards to the pros and cons, because from a social work perspective, when you think about adverse childhood experiences, all right, and you think about how children have been traumatized through incest, rape, abuse, and abandonment, okay, absent parents, parents being incarcerated, bullying. So you think about all those things and then that haven't been addressed, all right? And there's a reason why we don't show kids certain things on TV, like child pornography. You know, there's a reason why, because their minds have a difficult time processing that information, okay? So when you open up this can of wounds, when you open up this can and you release it to the whole society, who is there to close that womb up? When you released it, they're already dealing with trauma that hasn't been addressed. And then we add more trauma to the child's life, okay? Adults struggle to deal with certain things, okay? So imagine a child that watches this, that has no one to guide them, to encourage them, to explain to them how to process what has happened. So that's why I asked the question from an adverse childhood perspective, with children growing up, experiencing trauma that hadn't been addressed. Now it's compounded. So that was my concern as a Black professor, as a professor that's educating and talking about these things in the classroom. That was my concern. My expertise is with children and families. So I think about the child and the family. And who is going to be there to help them process these things when you open them wounds up? Because if you can't close them up, you open them up, but you don't close them up.
I think that is a question of sorts. So if we do, if we do end up in a space where our kids or children are being exposed to these things, how do we respond in a way that is trauma informed and not trauma inducing or compounding the trauma?
That is just the foundational issue of being Black in America again. On the one hand, it is traumatizing. I have not watched the entire video. And I don't share Black death on social media. So if there's any Black death that's been going, we just skip that. And I try to protect myself as much as I humanly possibly can. Just a little small snippet of what I saw was enough for me to cry like a baby driving home after we came from a rally the Friday night after the video was released. So on the one hand, we deal with this trauma, and it's a reoccurring trauma each and every time. But at the same time, and this is a double bind of Black America, that if there was a video and if it never was released, there will be some people still to this day saying that he hurt himself, or he did this, or something happened, or whatever. Even though we saw the picture in the hospital, that we knew something happened, but without the video, and it reminds me real quick of the reporter, the AP reporter that called, and after Derek Chauvin was convicted, wanted to get my impressions on the video being released, because he was writing a story on, he was so shocked. He was a reporter for 20 years, and he was shocked to find out after 20 years that police actually lied on the initial police report. That was the whole story. The story was that they lied. And I said, oh, really? You just finding this out? I was kind of shocked. I was just taken aback. He's been doing this. He said, we have just been taught to always take the police report and just print it as is. This is like, police said this. But isn't it good now that we got the video and it's helping and it's convicting folk? I said, yeah, on one hand, but on the other hand, it's still traumatizing. I wish that people would just believe Black folk or believe everybody that was around when George Floyd was trying to get him. If Donnella Frazier did not upload that video, y'all, Derek Chauvin would still be training police officers in the Minneapolis Police Department. Because we would have never known what would happen to Joe. The brother just lost his breath and could not breathe. That actually in the police report.
Or he might have did something to deserve it. That's what people would have said.
Or that too.
Dre,
and then all of a sudden, we would never gotten justice in their case.
I want to dig into this a little bit further, though. Yes, the double bind, the complicated nature of being Black in America, but and I think Principal McAfee, if you speak a little bit more to the coaching that the district gave you, I think that might more aptly or more directly address the question of, if we are going to expose children to this type of material and it's already traumatizing and they've already been traumatized, then what's the rubric? What are the standards? What are the steps that need to be taken to ensure that we do consider adverse childhood experiences or ACEs? And so my hunch is that you were coached or instructed on that from the district. And if you can share, I think that'll be helpful.
Yeah, so the publication was just for us to be able to have a segue into the conversation without hurting students further or traumatizing them. So it wasn't deep with the information that was already out there. It was just a basis. We have conversation starters, things that, to avoid, those conversations you want to avoid, those different issues you want to avoid, and then how to really speak to some of the different things. So it wasn't very broad. It was just some basic, information. If that space was created or a student did ask, So
Did the
here's
students
just some
come up? I'm
support.
curious about this. Did students come up and start talking about this?
At my school, I didn't have any students who really came up to me and talk about it, about the situation.
Did any of the teachers say that students in their class kind of brought it up?
Now, I did have a couple of teachers who did say that the students did bring it up, but I, of course, did share the information. And I asked them, and so they had more questions. They wanted to know why, why did they do that to him? Those were the questions that were asked.
And I think, to be honest, that's unavoidable.
Right.
Because
absolutely.
whether you produce it or not, it's there for public consumption. And kids get access to all kind of stuff, child pornography included.
Absolutely.
Now, I don't mean we
Absolutely.
need to endorse it, but we do
Absolutely.
need to be prepared to respond to it. Now, where I think, Mickell, you can help us with a little bit of perspective, the whole transparency and accountability thing, right? Like that footage technically belongs to the people.
Yeah, it does. And we already struggle with people already not believing things that happen or believe there's a system issue as is. So the more transparent you can be, the better. I understand that the point that was made there, especially as a father who has an 8-year-old and a 13-year-old, and they both have access to want to use phones and tablets and everything else. Trust me, they're gonna find it. They're gonna find whatever's out there, and it's up to us as parents, and hopefully up to people like both of you all, like the professors and teachers, to help people shape in another direction. But again, it's one of those issues. You can't please everybody when it comes to something like this. But what's going to be for the greater good, and hopefully they'll have people like the professor there, and hopefully other mentors that can really shape the conversation for those people who may be triggered their aces when it comes to those things.
I'm gonna invite another question. Okay, go ahead. You tell me the question. I'll relay it back so that the people who are watching can hear it. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. El Negro.
And he talked about what the education does to us.
Mm-hmm.
So from your perspective, is this intentional?
Mm-hmm. Is that the question? So the question is so for those who are watching online, the question is anti-blackness that is being internalized by black people, is that intentionally done? Did I frame the question well? Okay, so I got plenty to say about that. I'm pitching it to y'all. Do y'all think that, it is by design that black people end up being anti-black? And the resource that was quoted, for those who are not in the room, is Carter G. Woodson's Miseducation of the Negro.
Wow.
And we'll wrap this up in 5 to 6 minutes.
Intentional, I just want to get clarification. Intentional from the individual, the black individual, or intentional from the system? Right. Oh, right. I mean, what scholars have now been pushing and opening up our eyes even more, instead of just racism, instead of white racism, or even white supremacy is the bedrock or the foundation of anti-blackness. What makes white supremacy work is people being anti-black. And so when we talk about anti-blackness, we move away just for a moment from race and just talk about just blackness itself. And we know this linguistically. All you have to do is put the adjective black in front of anything, and then you got an issue.
A negative.
Black theology, black liberation theology.
Black sheep,
whatever.
black hole.
Whatever. Yeah, right.
Black market.
So anti-blackness around the globe, around the world. So that gets into, I saw when I walked in today, you guys going to have a discussion on colorism on March 2nd. I saw the flyer out there. So colorism, light skin, dark skin, all of that stuff. So you're asking the question if it's intentional. for a lot of people, the Black person, it is maybe not intentional because we have already bought into whiteness to begin with.
Mhm.
So what they thought they were doing was the right thing, and they bought into that already. So I didn't even need to push them. As far as the system goes, it's already baked into it.
Yeah.
We have to actively, as Black folk, we are part of this system too. So we have to actively resist that. Now, put the preacher hat on, resisting evil.
Mhm.
That's what we actually have to do, maybe even on a daily basis, because we can easily slip into talking about those people over there. Talking about, oh, I done moved away from those folk. How you talking? And then you are shocked when you are those folk at the place that you moved. And then you all of a sudden looking around talking about how dare they treat me like I need somebody to stand up for me. Where were you when we were asking folk to stand up for all of the other folk? Come on, y'all. We got to do better than that. So yes. So anti-Blackness, if we are not careful, we can adopt these tenets. And we would honestly believe, and there are some people who have just pushed the envelope so far to honestly believe that the proximity to whiteness makes them better. And all you're doing is setting yourself up for a big disappointment and a big fall.
Come on, Mickell.
Yeah, that's why I'm loving to listen. I'm telling you, you know, and I hear and receive all of that. But the people I think, I guess I've seen in my space when we talk about anti-Black, it's not anti-Black, they're anti-economic conditions. Because people love Black people on TV. You love the music. You love the clothes. White folks want to be browner, tanner, whatever you want to call it. But you don't want to have your economic situation. You don't want to live over there. You don't want to live in poor communities. You don't want to have bad schools. You don't want to have bad roads. And white folks deal with Black folks who can afford to live where they live. Some of them do. Some of them do. I'm not talking about utopia. I'm not talking about utopia. Because I'll just be like this. I don't have many Black folks that live around where I live right now. But they're like, oh, but that after they try to ask you, what do you do and all this kind of good stuff? Oh, they may be okay. They must be okay. If they don't ask, they assume you okay. I'm not talking about utopia. I'm just saying most of us.
When you get to 8 to 10%,
nobody got a problem where John Morant live. John Morant don't live around nobody Black. But he okay out there in ease. Because he's John Morant. I'm just telling you, sometimes it's not sometimes for me. It's just it's not just for me, just the color. It's the economic conditions that people are in as well. That's what I think we can't miss one without the other.
Yeah, just a second, Miss Lisa.
I just wanted to go back to the economic disparities because growing up in South Memphis, I love South Memphis. You know, that's all I knew. But my question is, what happened to wanting to live in South Memphis? You know, coming from South Memphis, attending Lemoyne College right in South Memphis, I was excited. I loved it. So it's almost like their self-love is gone. You know, it's like we want to be like this. You know, how do we continue to create the love in the community? I'm just wondering, like, what happened to?
Well, what happened? What happened is you gonna pass the mic back there? Okay. So, and how much time we got left? 10 minutes. Okay. Cool. That's helpful. Here's where I think the conversation is leading, and I think it's most helpful here. It is leading back to the conversation about the system and the structure. What happened to the love? It's systemically and structurally being removed from us. How is anti-Blackness impacting Black people? Because you are learning it from the day you end up in a public school where the curriculum is crafted by majority white people, and if it's in Tennessee, in a white nationalist state. So what happens? Why are the economic disparities what they are? Because it's part and parcel of the system and the structure as it was designed. Carter G. Woodson said, you can train somebody to go through the back door so much that if you ever put them in a room and there is no back door, they're going to make one to go out of. So that's the psychology of it. It's the system and the structure. So what's dangerous is if we only do the tokenism, Or, yeah, well, 5 of them over here are straight, or 10 of them over here are straight. Why is South Memphis in the condition it is? Public policy, disinvestment, intentional withdrawal of resources that makes it harder to live where you want to if you want to live near Black folks and still keep property value. Redlining, all of this stuff is systemic and structural. It's not coincidental, it's not happenstance, and it's not arbitrary. We learn it, as Dr. Dre has said, you gotta confront it every day. And shame on us if you ever end up in a Black institution and don't get the resources to confront it. Yes, a student with a Alpha. You see this, Alpha.
They
Y'all
don't,
see it?
every decision that folks make can't be the right one. At least you at Lemoyne, you know.
Go ahead, Drew.
Well, I just want to say thank you all for just taking this out, well, being here. So that's where I want to start. And I was the one with the question as a student just attending this institution. And I wanted to kind of answer your question of why haven't we talked about it? And I think it's the ideal thought of just fear. Fear of the trauma of past situations. And me as a student, and I see both sides. My parents are in law enforcement. So I have to see them wake up, throw the vest on, throw the camera on, throw the gun on their hip. I have to see them every day do that.
Yeah.
And I have to pray to the God I believe in, they come home.
Mm-hmm.
And I have little brothers, nieces, nephews, who my older siblings aren't in the right mindset to guide them. So they look to me to guide. And I have to, I guess, come up with that idea of what can I teach you? Mm-hmm. What can I put into you? I can't give you everything I know, but I have to pour something into you. And me just being a student at this institution in the years I've been here, I've learned the importance of an HBCU. I've learned the importance of being a student, an adult. And I want to take the time to just say to our Madam President, it's okay to be scared. Because we look to you to help, to guide us, to lead us, and to get us out of those dark situations that the world has coming towards us. And you have people like myself who will grab your hand in those dark moments. And so I really want to say to everybody in here, it's okay to be scared.
Yeah.
It's okay to be uncomfortable, but we have to be uncomfortable to be comfortable eventually.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
it's an alpha man right there. I just thought, hey, easy. You might not want to comment.
And just, I want to end this by saying, just attending Lemoyne College, I think we have to just not learn how to open a book or learn criminal justice or how to cut something open. Being a Black person, I think we have to learn what the lifestyle of being Black in America.
Yeah.
And I feel like we cover that up with so many sheets of, oh, it's okay. You can get that white lifestyle to be better, but it's just we're covering up something that doesn't need to be covered, especially if we want to move forward how we say we want to move forward.
Come on, y'all, give it up one more time. Look, thank y'all for such an engaging and entertaining.
My name is Troy Williams. I'm sorry.
Oh, we know. Oh, I'm sorry. Troy Williams of the Beta Xi chapter of Alpha Phi Alpha Fraternity Incorporated here at Lemoyne College. No, seriously. I hate to cut it short. I'm calling on my Holy Ghost right now.
Get your Holy Ghost. It's gonna be quick.
We'll take this last question after which, because we only had 10 minutes a few minutes ago. And then we'll try to get some final comments from the panelists before we conclude. But yes, final question.
Thank you so much.
Mm-hmm.
I am Sherry McIntyre Howard, a proud alum of LOC, class of 01. Grew up in South Memphis, graduated when I was 37 years old. I'll be 57 if God blesses me to see it April 30th. My question is this. We talked about the trauma. We talked about everything. Mickell, I love you, so don't take this the wrong way. But we have city councilmen that when this occurred, to help the school. When the school, she said the school did something. We have a city councilman for every district in Memphis. I did not hear one city councilman go to any neighborhoods and try to do or get anybody together, which they could have did, because we are out here talking about it. But because I'm not you, you don't hear me. So what can we do? Like after I said, oh, Dr. Johnson, I've been waiting to meet you. I want to come up here and meet you. I need Dr. Johnson to remember me, because I'm not out here. You're not going to see me. I work for the FAA. You're not going to see me at the FAA, but I'm involved. I'm in the NAACP. I'm at Lemoyne. I'm at the Metropolitan Baptist Church that I've been at. I'm a legacy over here for my family. When are we going to stop the fact that we can't say, when you get through, this was wrong. We are guilty. Nobody has said we are guilty. As a Black people, we are guilty. They didn't just do this. They just got caught.
Great point. Well, I'll affirm the question and present it to y'all this way for closing remarks. How do we stop the trauma? That's why we're in this complicated situation, whether it's in the classroom, whether it's in city council, county commission chambers, whether it's in higher education. We are responding to what seems to be an endless cycle of Black death, Black pain, Black trauma. How do we stop? I think this is the essence of what Cherie is asking. Like, how do we stop this?
I'll just make a quick comment here is how do we stop it? How do we start to stop it is we gotta, again, I'll go back, we gotta change our culture. People, we gotta, in my opinion, we have a culture issue when it comes to acceptance of violence, acceptance of economic conditions. I know we're talking about Tyree Nichols here, but there were 11 people shot yesterday. Over the weekend, mass shooting. There's an 11-year-old that's been arrested over 20 times, they say. We become numb to it, and we change the channel, and we talk about it, because unfortunately, again, to those brothers here, we had a police officer that was murdered at the Popular Library. So as soon as we want to get on social media, I'll just speak. As soon as I want to get on social media and I'm saying something about Tyree Nichols, gosh, if I don't say something here, then people will say I'm not saying anything about law enforcement. Well, if I say something here, that means we got a culture issue that we got to continuously have. It can't just be one conversation, that's it. It has to, we have to start movements in our classrooms. We got to start movements in the county commission. Like you said, we got to start movements to where this is continuous, and we need to embrace it. As one thing Memphis can do from these situations is lead from it. And leading is uncomfortable because it shines a light on some ugly truths, that there were Black officers involved, that there's a culture of violence in our community. There's a culture that we forget violence. We just had a study that brought out about Memphis being top in infectious diseases.
Yeah, STDs.
STDs. We get numb to it. So sometimes making ourselves uncomfortable, changing our culture and saying, okay, we're going to put these things out. We're not going to run from, we're not going to embrace, we're not going to run around the corner. We're not going to move to the next neighborhood, wherever it may be, to use that kind of analogy. And continue, we change the culture, then it won't be so much trauma. That's in my opinion. I think that's what we got to have, these uncomfortable conversations and keep it out there and keep it in the forefront. And this is my final comment. I'll say this because I think we're wrapping it up here. First of all, thank you all for being here as well. And Madam President, always thank you for leading the opening space up. And thank you all for listening online. What I want to see going forward when these type of discussions, I want to see more students here. I see a lot of familiar faces, and y'all were around when I was around. So, and a lot of mentors here with Dr. Christian being here as well. But we got to get creative about this. I don't care if we tell students, You know, you can come to class 30 minutes later because you came to this session. We can leave the class 30 minutes earlier. Or I'm happy to put some resources if we got to give some gift cards to Starbucks or Chick-fil-A to incentivize. Sometimes you have to, I remember what I was like when I was 18, 19 years on campus. If it's a nice day out on a Thursday, I went in the little theater listening to discussions unless I gave incentive to come. I'm in the gym. I'm doing the things I want to do with my time. Now, as time goes on, you get influenced and you're like, okay, someone drugged me here or set me down here and made sure I was here. But we got to do more of that. There's a lot of people over there in the dorms right now, and they're in the gym, wherever they are. And that's because that's what they choose to do with their time. We got to incentivize folks to be here. That's about changing the culture. The HBC, only HBCU in Memphis, anytime there's this conversation about colorism or black AF, you all know what that means. Standing room only in here going forward. And I'm happy to do whatever I can to incentivize that for students.
I give it up for Chairman Mickell Lowery. Andre Johnson, final comments?
I do this work. Okay. Yeah, there you go. I do this work also as a victim of violent crime. My nephew was brutally shot and killed. 7 to 9 shots, we believe, entered his body. Principal McAfee here was his 5th grade teacher. She showed up at the funeral, gave wonderful, glowing comments, and shared with us and made us feel just a little bit better. Mickell was his name, or is his name. And so I do this work understanding that side of it. But you know what happened? Well, the person that allegedly, we haven't gone through trial and all that, allegedly, that guy, he's going through the court system now and probably will be convicted. So he committed a crime. There's no hate, no animosity in my. I wrestle with all of that, and I'm gonna show up at some of the court hearings if I can, and I'm gonna sit there and I'm gonna look him if I can in his eyes and all of that, and I'm gonna go through that. I'm gonna probably think about Mickell more, because he was a great guy. So I do this work knowing that side of it, knowing that pain as well too, and doing the eulogy of my nephew. I know that side. But what's going to happen is somebody will be held accountable for his death. And when convicted, his murder. When people ask me, how can we stop this? I'm very pessimistic. I don't think we can. If everything that I suggest you implement tomorrow, I still think that there is no training that you could have given those 5 officers. That's absolutely, so it's not a training. That's nothing you could have done to stop. That's beyond training. That's something in here. That's what you were getting at. It's like, what's wrong? And that's why I was asking the question, because they look familiar. They in our community. Some of them were members of the Divine Nine. They were members of our churches and of our communities. They went to schools with us. They knew us. Some people we knew dated them. I mean, they were so familiar. So I'm not thinking that this is going to stop anything. What we are battling right now is to hold folk accountable. If you are going to wild out like that, you need to be held accountable. And for so long, policing in this city and in this country has not been held accountable at all. And one day we're going to have to wake up and realize that when the civil suits come in, the city would have to spend. So next time we have another pothole or we need some more city services, let us remember that we're about to pay out a whole lot of money again, because we could not literally hold folk accountable. That's what I'm after. Accountability. We call her Lisa. My wife here is here. She's a mediator. We call that compassionate accountability. Holding folk accountable. Because yes, you messed up. You did this. Wouldn't it have been wonderful if all five would have said, you know what, y'all got me. We did it. We'll fall. We don't want to put the city through too much trauma. Wouldn't that's a whole different paradigm.
Yeah.
That's what we're trying to work at. But until that time, let's hold folk accountable.
I'll give it up for Dr. Andre Johnson.
Thank you again, Madam President, for this opportunity, Dr. Fisher, being up here with the greats. Two things that really was going through my head was we do have cultural issues, but we also have an accountability issue. And it starts in an integrity issue. And it starts as early as elementary school. You can't be afraid. Thank you, Scholar, for speaking up and speaking out. You can't be afraid. You have to have the courageous conversations. Being a principal, I get a lot of pushback from parents. Don't want to follow policy and procedure. Have a problem with you saying things to them. I am in this work because I know that one of my students at Alcy Elementary School will one day be in this seat. So it's important for them to see me in this seat because it will be them. We have to ensure that we're visible, we're vigilant. When we see something happening, we got to say something. That's the conversation I have to my leadership team. When you see something taking place in the classroom, you got to say something. Sometimes it might not be the right time to say something because you need to process it. But you cannot allow things to happen and don't say anything about it. When you operate in a school, we have policies and procedures that we have to follow from the state all the way down. But at Alcy Elementary School, our students are going to be safe, they're going to be valued and respected, and they have a voice. And they know that they are loved. So you have to continue to create that space and make sure you create those opportunities to bring communities together. Because what's missing is the discourse. We can teach all day in the schools, but until we get the families in the building, we got to open up. COVID was in 2020. It's time to bring families and communities back into the school. They want to be involved. They want to be involved. The doors are open, but we have to invite them and educate them. No, you can't come in this school and do what you want to do and say what you want to say. Not in this school, but you're welcome. And I do need your help. It takes a village. But in this school, this is how we operate for our children. And when I'm in this building, I belong to these children. They have all of my attention. And we have to make children a priority. Until children become our priority, we're going to continue to have these problems. We just got to make sure that we are adulting and allow children to children. So they have to be our priority, and we have to say something. Peers, colleagues, peers, you got to say something. You got to, if you really care about children in the future of Memphis.
All right, y'all. Thank you to Lemoyne College. Thank you to Madam President. And thank you to these wonderful panelists. Y'all come on and greet them on your way out. Thank y'all for tuning in and for being here. Have a great evening.